Welcome to my channel on the best of fantasy. This is my top reads of 2021 video. Looking back on the year, it has been a tremendous and fun year of reading for me, for the channel. Lots of great fantasy, and it was actually pretty difficult looking back to decide which books I would include in this video. However, and I also didn't have a set number of books that I thought I should include. I just thought to myself, well, the criteria should be something like this. What were the books that I felt had the greatest impact on me? What were the books that I admired the most deeply? What were the books that moved me? So that's what I wanted to think about when I was looking back and thinking about what would I include in this video. And there were some really, really beautiful stories that I am so glad that I read in 2021, and I'm excited to share them with you. I will not be including any rereads in this video. So that means that no books from the Malazan Book of the Fallen will appear on this video because I have already read the Malazan Book of the Fallen, even though the main thing going on my channel is this reread of the Malazan Book of the Fallen. It's a series that I've already read before, so I'm not going to include any rereads. That also excludes Dune, which, yes, I read it 30 years ago, but technically it was a reread as well. So there are certain books that I admired and loved deeply, but they were rereads, so I'm not going to include them in this video, and that's just a way of getting down the number of books, because honestly, it could have been an entire video talking about the Malazan Book of the Fallen. So, you know me, and I've really been enjoying that series tremendously. That doesn't mean there will be nothing Malazan in this video, however. But let's start. I'm going to do this in order. These are not going to be ranked. I'm going to do this in the order that I read the book. So the earliest in the earlier in the year, that will come first. So the earliest to the latest, the most recent, that is. So yeah, here let's just get started with my top reads of 2021, beginning with The Wheel of Ostheim by Mark Lawrence. This is the conclusion to the Red Queen's War trilogy. And it is also the conclusion, in a sense, to the World of the Broken Empire, because there are two parallel trilogies. There's the Broken Empire trilogy, and there's the Red Queen's War trilogy. And the two trilogies take place in the same world. They could be even read concurrently, I suppose. Although I do recommend reading Broken Empire first, because there are the Red Queen's War trilogy was written afterwards, and there are lots of interesting little Easter eggs and little cameos and things that will be more meaningful to you if you have read the Broken Empire trilogy. But I just thought this was such a wonderful conclusion to this world that Mark Lawrence has created. And this is it's slightly different in tone as well. If you're familiar with Broken Empire, the Red Queen's War trilogy has a different narrator and first person again, but Jalin is a very different character from Jorg. And so that affects the whole tone of the trilogy. Jalin is a bit of a rogue, a bit of a trickster. So he is a lovable rogue, however. But the chief delight in the Red Queen's War trilogy for me, as it's brought to this amazing conclusion, The Wheel of Ostheim, the chief delight is the relationship between Jalin and Snorri. If you want to learn a lot about friendship, particularly friendship with people who are very different from one another, then this is a wonderful trilogy to read, and that is at the heart of it, the idea of friendship. There are other things to it as well, but that's the thing that really sticks with me. Also, a lot about the magical system in the Broken Empire world. You learn a lot about that in the Red Queen's War trilogy. So kind of interesting mystery component to this as well, almost a veering into sci-fi. So yeah, very fun trilogy for me. And The Wheel of Ostheim, absolutely brilliant conclusion to the Red Queen's War trilogy. So that is the first of my favorite reads from 2021. Next, I have The Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne. I actually read everything that John Gwynne has published in 2021, and that makes me very happy to say. And I am very much a John Gwynne fan at this point, you can imagine. And a lot of people would say that The Faithful and the Fallen which is set in the Banished Lands, is probably their favorite of the John Gwynne stories. He also has his sequel trilogy to The Faithful and the Fallen of Blood and Bone, and he has begun a new trilogy, the Bloodsworn trilogy, which begins with The Shadow of the Gods. I had a great time reading everything in the Banished Lands. Fantastic, very nostalgic already. I feel very nostalgic already about the Banished Lands. Had a great time meeting that large cast of characters. Many of them stand out as extremely lovable. Love the animal companions as well in there. So it's just a lot of heart to John Gwynne's writing, and particularly in the Banished Lands. So that's why a lot of people just love The Faithful and the Fallen. But for me, there's a reason why The Shadow of the Gods eclipses The Faithful and the Fallen and Of Blood and Bone. And the main reason for me is I think John Gwynne has really found his stride as a writer. And I also believe that this style is very conducive to his writing. And it is very akin to the saga style. That is the sagas of Iceland, the Icelandic sagas. There is a kind of conciseness, a brevity, a starkness to The Shadow of the Gods that is not a feature so much of the books in the Banished Lands. It is Norse inspired. The Bloodsworn trilogy is very much Norse inspired. And that is something I really enjoy. There's an understated nature to Icelandic sagas that Gwynne beautifully replicates in The Shadow of the Gods. And since I am a medievalist who is particularly fascinated by Old English poetry and by Old Norse, and particularly the sagas from Iceland, this really, really struck a chord with me. So that is one reason why, for me, The Shadow of the Gods is my favorite thing so far written by John Gwynne. I absolutely love the way he has managed to give me the feel of an Icelandic saga in The Shadow of the Gods. And so it is my favorite thing so far, and I'm very hopeful that he'll be able to continue this in the next two books of the Bloodsworn trilogy. I'm very excited. I believe book 2 is going to be coming out in May of 2022. So I am very excited for that. And so yes, The Shadow of the Gods. And now let's move on to the next one on the list. This is the book that I don't own a copy of. It's a funny story actually. I saw this book in the library and decided on a whim to go for it, to just try this book because I'd heard about it. I heard some really wonderful people on BookTube talking about this book, and I thought, wow, I think I might need to try this. And so I saw it in the library, checked it out, and I'm so glad I did because it has turned into one of my favorite reads of the year, and it's probably the most different book on this list from all the others, and it is Piranesi. This was a book by Susanna Clarke that came out after quite a while from Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell was one of the reasons why I started my channel, because I believe very much that there's a lot of great fantasy that is worthy of critical exploration. And Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell was one of the books I had in mind when I started the channel. I never did review it because I read it years and years ago. And it is a very long book, so I just haven't reread it, and I would need to reread it to meaningfully review it. So when I heard about this latest book, Piranesi, I thought, okay, well, let's check it out. And it's very different in nature from Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, but it is absolutely brilliant. It's quite a short read, actually. And it's a book that even now when I'm thinking about it, I feel a sense of its dreamlike quality. It puts me back in that world where I was when I was reading the story, which is very bare, very simple, and very beautiful and compelling. And there's a lot of ambiguity in Piranesi. There are a couple different ways that you could interpret this story. And that is something I love. I really love how Susanna Clarke was able to sustain that ambiguity throughout. And you're not quite sure, is this what this is? Or is this? Or is it both somehow? And it is, in some ways, even perhaps you could call it a portal fantasy or fantasy, but you don't even need to. It's just a beautiful book and a wonderful dreamlike experience. And so it is a book that I absolutely am delighted to have read in 2021, and it's really stuck with me. And that's one of the criteria as well. The books that I think back and they stick out because they really had this quality of they're books that you can think about for a long time. And Piranesi is certainly one of those. So I really enjoyed the atmosphere of Piranesi a lot. Well, speaking of atmosphere, an author that I have started reading in 2021 who is absolutely one of the best writers of atmosphere I have ever encountered is Ian Esselmont, author of Novels of the Malazan Empire and co-creator of the Malazan World with Steven Erikson. And I've read so far the first 4 books in his Novels of the Malazan Empire. I've also, by the way, the previous year in 2020, I read the Path to Ascendancy trilogy as well. So he's an author I was already familiar with, but I had not yet read Novels of the Malazan Empire. And 4 books in, I am absolutely wowed. And as I said, he is so brilliant when it comes to atmosphere. It is just absolutely amazing what this guy can do, how he can put you in the moment, make you feel the tension. And the combination often of horror in fantasy, there's a horror element in quite a few of these, is just absolutely effective. It's chilling. So if you like a little bit of horror in your fantasy, Esselmont is a brilliant writer. I mean, it has this one, I'm picking Stonewielder. And it was a very close call for me between Stonewielder and Orb Scepter Throne. The Orb Scepter Throne is book 4, Stonewielder is book 3. It was just kind of almost toss a coin in a way. But there are a couple things that for me on a personal level just resonated with Stonewielder. The title character is absolutely a figure that I just am fascinated by. Having a strong central character who is ambiguous, who is conflicted, who is someone that is misunderstood and very crusty and curmudgeonly. I really enjoyed getting to know this character. So there's a whole mystery behind this character that is a compelling part of this book. It also contains, I would argue, the greatest naval battle ever written in fantasy. Okay, I'm putting my stake down right there. So it has an incredible naval battle, just brilliant stuff. And also one of the most stark, amazing settings in the Malazan world, a setting that is alluded to in the Malazan Book of the Fallen, but it doesn't really appear. It is a place that people speak about in whispers of awe, okay? And Esselmont portrays it here absolutely brilliantly. He is just a fantastic author, deserves a lot more love, a lot more attention, certainly from book 2, but in general. I mean, the guy is brilliant, a top fantasy writer of today. So Stonewielder had just a very big impact on me, and I had a delightful time reading it. I expect that the last 2 books of Novels of the Malazan Empire are also going to blow me away. I am trusting Esselmont at this point to deliver a brilliantly atmospheric story that will enrich my experience of the Malazan world. So there we go, Stonewielder, book 3 of Novels of the Malazan Empire. The next book on my list is also a book 3. It is the finish to a trilogy, but I also like to think of it as part of a much longer arc of books. And those would be the First Law books. And the book in question is the end of the Age of Madness trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. It is The Wisdom of Crowds. This came out in September. And wow, this was one of the 2 books that I was most excited to read in 2021. It was a new release in September, and it did not disappoint at all. I had high expectations because Abercrombie did a brilliant job in A Little Hatred and The Trouble of Peace, the first 2 books of the Age of Madness trilogy. For me, he is a writer who keeps getting better and better and better, and he already started out as brilliant. The guy does some of the most vivid characters in all of fantasy, in literature, period. The guy is just a wonderful character writer. Dialogue, you know which character is talking when you see the dialogue on the page. It just pops. He's an absolutely fantastic author. And in the Age of Madness trilogy, he also did a wonderful job of incorporating some very important themes. Social class and hierarchy and class warfare. And he does a lot of interesting things with gender and sexuality and other things in Age of Madness that he hadn't done much of previously. And I really loved it. I absolutely loved what Joe Abercrombie was doing here. The guy, it was already a favorite author of mine, but after reading Age of Madness and having him really stick the landing here, I'm in total awe, and I will be purchasing every book the guy writes. I mean, I hope that he will return to First Law after the Age of Madness trilogy. I understand he's doing some other project now. I will be buying that as well, but yeah, Joe Abercrombie just gets better and better with every book, and so this is one of my absolute favorites of the year. Wisdom of Crowds had me on the edge of my seat virtually the entire time. Just some brilliant action sequences and great understanding of human psychology. Yeah, so there's a lot to learn from these books. And the last on my list of the regular books that I'm discussing here as my favorites from 2021 is going to be, see, now I did work in Stephen Erickson, The God Is Not Willing. This is a book that came out here in the United States in November. And it came out earlier in Europe and elsewhere, but came out here in November, and I read it in November, and wow. I have to say that Stephen Erickson is my favorite author of all time, and that with this beginning to the Witness trilogy, The God Is Not Willing, I absolutely believe that he has not lost even a bit of his touch. I mean, this is a brilliant introduction to this new trilogy, which is kind of a sequel to the Malazan Book of the Fallen. It takes place about a decade after the Malazan Book of the Fallen ends. So there are some little nods back and some beloved characters and dealing with some consequences of events that happened in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. But it is its very own story as well. And it is certainly, I think, a possible entry point into the Malazan world. Why not? It could be a brilliant place, particularly because it's a bit shorter than the books in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. So if someone were to, say, want to just get a taste of Stephen Erickson's writing, the types of things that he does, the types of themes that he incorporates into his writing, I think this would be a wonderful way to do it. There are some very familiar Malazan themes in here. There is a lot about empathy and compassion. There is a lot about the environment. There is a lot about understanding understanding other people, connecting to other people. There's just a ton of things that would resonate with all the Malazan fans out there. And it is so brilliantly done in a slightly tighter story. So I think it could be a great introduction to what Erickson does in his Malazan books in general. So I loved this book. This was a deeply moving experience for me. And I was so lucky to be able to talk with AP over at A Critical Dragon about The God Is Not Willing, and as well to talk with Stephen Erickson about it. And those videos are on AP's channel on A Critical Dragon. I'll put a link in the description below. Wow, just mind-blowing, beautiful stuff. This is why I read, folks. This is why I'm a fan of fantasy literature. What Erickson does in The God Is Not Willing is he shows us what fantasy can do. He shows us that fantasy is not only a legitimate branch of literature, it is a branch of literature that is perhaps most conducive to the human imagination, to going where you can't go in other types of books. And as a consequence, fantasy allows us to deal with our very human struggles in realms that are perhaps different from our own, but reflections of our own. And that is just a wonderful thing. What Erickson does in here is, I think, terribly, terribly important, actually. He delivers a kind of catharsis. In the moments when the characters connect and you connect with the characters, something very important is happening there. There is a very important life lesson going on when that happens as the reader's experience. So just very appreciative of this book, and I'm just blown away by what Erickson can do in his writing. So yeah, beautiful stuff. And I have another book here. This is a bit of a cheat for me even to mention it because I have not finished reading this book. This is my current read right now. And I have a feeling that if I had finished reading this book, it would be in this video for sure. So I'm going to cheat and I'm going to just mention it. I will confirm later on whether or not I actually would keep this, because I'm going to review them. My next video after this is going to be a review of Wizard and Glass by Stephen King. This is book 4 of the Dark Tower series. I'm halfway or so through this book, and I love it. What I have seen so far is absolutely my favorite of what I've seen in the Dark Tower series thus far. And unless he just completely messes up in the second half of the book, I think it's going to be my favorite Dark Tower book so far, anyway, of the first 4. I have not yet read the rest of them, so we'll see. But wow, I just love this story. The combination of Western and fantasy in here, the extended flashback, I'm enjoying it thoroughly. I am enjoying the getting to know Roland very well here, and it's just an absolute... It's a deep look into what I consider to be one of the most iconic characters in fantasy. If we can call this fantasy. I think we can. It's fine to call it fantasy, but it is much more than fantasy. King just does not hesitate to grab from wherever he needs at the moment. So there's horror in here. There is obviously fantasy, science fiction. There is just all kinds of stuff in here that he grabs from all over, and it is wonderful. It is the most eclectic, bizarre series I've ever seen, and I love it for that. So I'm enjoying that element of it, and I'm enjoying Stephen King's insights into human nature. The guy tells it like it is. He does not flinch from portraying us warts and all, and it's really, really compelling stuff. So yeah, I'm thoroughly enjoying this series, and I will let you know when I review it if I think it still belongs in my top reads of the year, but I just couldn't resist mentioning it because I think it will eclipse even book 3, The Wastelands, which I enjoyed. Every book I've loved even just a little bit more than the last. And it is a series that I'm pretty sure will remain in my top 10 fantasy series of all time because of these. I mean, he's just blown me away in here. So yeah, those are my reads for this year that stuck out to me as stories that will absolutely be with me to the end of my days, stories that I will revisit. I will read these again. These are books that are worth rereads, and these are books that I found very compelling and moving. Some of them made me cry, but all of them made me feel that I understood who I am and what I am just a little bit more. And for that, I am deeply appreciative. And I'm also appreciative of this year and all my interactions with all of you and my fellow booktubers, such as my nemesis, Professor Fireballs, and all the other booktubers that I've had the privilege to have conversations with, to have discussions with about these books. And it's been such an honor and a privilege to be able to talk with all of you about books and to have your reactions in the comments. I am so deeply appreciative of all the comments and all of the support and the kindness that I have received this year. So I want to thank you all once again for all of that. It's very, very meaningful to me to be part of this community and to learn from all of you and to appreciate all of you. So thank you very much. And until next time.